Welcome, Ryan Nelson is the founder and CEO of Sweetwater Companies, a vertically integrated real estate firm based in Phoenix, Arizona. From development and construction to property management, Ryan has built a company that controls the entire life cycle of real estate assets. In the conversation, we go beyond the surface, diving in how he scaled Sweetwater, the realities of development, operational challenges at scale, and where AI is beginning to reshape the future of real estate. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate you having me on the show.
As we get started here, what originally pulled you into real estate, and what did those early days look like for you?
Yeah, great question. I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My dad didn't have a college education, had started a business and sold that. And then he kind of had a little bit of money to kind of start developing real estate. And so I kind of observed this as I was working with him and going through college. And it was kind of fun. There was something about that was really kind of intriguing. I had a lifelong dream myself to go into to be an Air Force pilot. And so I actually, out of undergrad, I went into the Air Force. I went through pilot training, graduated, and became what they call a first assignment instructor pilot, so a FAPE. And I was there serving. It was actually during that time that my dad, unfortunately, he passed away with his business partner in a small plane crash. And so consequently, I'd kind of been involved in my dad's business. I'd seen kind of what he had been working on. And, I owe the Air Force a great deal because I went to my commanding officer and said, "Hey, this is my situation that my family's going through. What do we do?" And, the Air Force went to bat for me. They were able to get me relocated closer to home. So I was still in the Air Force fulfilling my commitment, but I was able to work on real estate in my free time there. So that was kind of my initial foray into real estate. And I can tell more a little bit about that story as we get into it.
When you started Sweetwater, what was the initial vision?
The initial vision, and knowing what I know now, and if I were to go back, I probably would have had more of a solid business plan of what we were trying to do. Really, what I saw, it stemmed from two things. I had been exposed to real estate development through my dad's business, but the part that I'll mention now is kind of a segue in how I got into it. When he passed away, my day job was still as Air Force pilot, and I was kind of overseeing his stuff on the side. He passed away in December of 2007, which, maybe you remember, Ed, or your listeners will remember that was kind of the very early stages of the great financial crisis. And so
yes, I do.
My dad was in the middle of 3 different projects. And it was really kind of the worst case scenario of everything that you can imagine. The 2 principals are gone. Property values are plummeting. We have personal guarantees across all these different projects. And, I'm an Air Force pilot kind of thrown in the midst of this, trying to figure this out. Through the course of that, I like to tell people, I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things the hard way. Some of the things that I learned is the things that I just didn't know, candidly. And so my dad's business is kind of wound down for all intents and purposes. I had an opportunity to go to business school. So I took that opportunity, went and got my MBA. And it was during my time at business school that I actually had some colleagues, some people in my cohort that were saying, as a military guy, you'd be really well served to spend a couple of years in investment banking. And so I actually did that. I was working in investment banking, high finance. And that was really I wanted to kind of round out my skill set there as far as understanding the finance piece of it, because I felt like I understood, kind of the nuts and bolts of real estate and real estate development, how that worked, but I didn't really have the finance background. So anyway, point being, you asked specifically, why did I get back into real estate, or what was kind of the vision? It was actually while working in banking that I kind of started to toe back in just on the side. And I was doing the small project, a 48 unit ground up development. And I could see that things were working well. And I just thought, this is really a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun here. And it was during that time, I was on the trading desk one day and I was telling one of my colleagues, who's kind of a veteran of the trading desk, had been there like 30 plus years. And I was telling him about this project that I was doing in my free time. And I was talking about, kind of my projected returns and everything like that, which, by the way, they were exceeding everything that we were seeing on the desk as far as, different return opportunities. And he looked at me and he's like, "Why don't you just go do that?" And I didn't have, a good answer for that. I was like, well, I do like it. And I thought about that a lot. And I ended up putting in my notice and going and doing that full time.
Wow.
Now, I will say, knowing what I know now, I should have had more of a business plan. I basically had I was doing one project and I had like the next project that we had line of sight on that we were going to go do.
Yeah.
But as far as like fundraising, how are we going to build out our team? What's our niche? Like all of these things, I was just like, I'll just figure it out.
Sometimes the enthusiasm and the excitement at least gets you going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that was in the summer of 2016. And, this summer will be 10 years that we've been at this with Sweetwater.
And how is it involved?
Yeah. So we grew from that first project, just trying to figure it out, to where we are now. We're about 115 million assets under management. We've developed about 200 million of real estate. And we're just looking to continue to grow.
Did you ever imagine it would lead to this?
No, actually. And in fact, anybody that's done entrepreneurship, if they're honest with you, they will tell you that it's a pretty bumpy road. Along the way, you think, what have I done? Why don't I just go get my job back? That was a lot easier than what I'm trying to do now. So no, I didn't really envision that we'd get to this point. But, that said, yeah, I was just going to say, you asked, did I ever envision that we would get here? And I said, no, I don't think that I can envision that. And I think, you've talked to other people that are in entrepreneurship. The reality is there's a lot of bumps on the road. And those that are honest will tell you that there's a lot of days where you're like, what have I done? Why don't I just go get my job back? That was a lot easier than what I'm trying to figure out right now.
But the reward is incredible, right?
100%. And to that point, I think different folks are, different strokes for different folks, right? There's things that motivate us and we're wired differently. For me, I was always about what can I do? What can I go create? And I got a lot more sense of accomplishment from something that I felt like I built and that my fingerprints were all over, rather than being a piece of a very large machine.
Very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Very rewarding. Absolutely.
So what was the hardest phase, talking about growing, you personally endeavored, like when you were getting into this as a founder? What was the hardest phase of growth?
I certainly like probably the first year. So my wife and I, we have 5 kids, and we're a single income family. And so I left my employer, and my runway was kind of about 2 years of savings that I was like, okay, I know that I can live if we don't have another paycheck for 2 years, basically. And I was fortunate to get to that point through saving and planning and all that kind of stuff. But I found out shortly after I left my job that my wife was pregnant. And then we were planning to break ground on our second project. And it turned out that there was a complication with the entitlement. This is the school of hard knocks, right? And so what I was projecting was going to be like, another home run opportunity. I looked at it, I'm like, well, I'm set back probably 4 or 5 months before, my initial assumption of when we would start to generate revenue. So that was a very, very challenging time. Is like, are we going to continue to do this?
Were there any pivotal deals or moments that really changed the trajectory of your business?
Yeah, the first time, and I think every entrepreneur, every founder has this experience where it's like, I can do this, I know what I'm doing kind of thing. I had some initial early successes, but I think the one that really kind of was a springboard, if you will, was the first time that we actually raised money. We became aware of this property where a guy had put together some investors, and he had purchased a piece of property. He was going through the entitlements, and unfortunately he passed away. And so they were looking for someone that could come in and either buy the property outright or, basically assume the role of the manager and go forward. And so initially, I spent several months speaking with the attorney that was kind of representing this ownership group. And I just said, hey, we can buy the property, but this is where we need to buy this out at. And the investors would have had to take a pretty significant haircut at that purchase price. And their view was, well, we invested in this for the upside. We don't want to just take a loss. And so there was actually four groups competing for this piece of property. I was one of them, and by far the most inexperienced and the least capitalized. There was actually 2 legitimate billionaires that were kind of in the running to purchase this property. And I just said, hey, listen, What if I just became the manager and the investors can ride alongside us? I'll have to go raise more money, but what if we did that? And the attorney, that was very well received, and it was very well received among the ownership group. And so I got on a video conference, much like this, and I
Yeah.
just walked them through my proposal and walked them through the scenario. And I was kind of facing the firing squad, so to speak, is like, well, what kind of experience do you have to do this? Have you ever done a project like this before? Walk us through the pro forma, all of the kind of questions that you would expect from an investor, right? And we were very fortunate in that we nailed that interview, and so that was kind of our springboard into doing that
That
deal and,
launch
and
year.
other deals. So
That's a great story, especially when you're competing against, very experienced, very well funded other companies. How has your leadership style changed as you have scaled your company?
There's two things that I would say. I think in the early days, I had much more of a scarcity mentality. And what I mean by that is I was still trying to figure out, like, is there enough in this deal for me, like, to make money? Like, I'm like fighting for my own survival kind of thing. If I could go back, I would probably have two things that I would shift there. I would say there's always another deal. There's room at the top, and let's try to figure out how to expand the pie so that everybody is compensated. I think if I had done that approach from the beginning, I would be much bigger today than we are.
As you have developed, as you've gotten bigger, what is the biggest pain point Sweetwater is dealing with today across your portfolio?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of investors, and we have a lot of investors that like us and like what we do. What I'm learning the more that I do this, when I need capital may not line up exactly with when people are ready to invest capital, right? Because the nature of real estate, it's like, okay, I'm working on these deals. I'm going to need this money at this time. And I go out to my investors, and then, it's
Timing.
continually trying to corral capital and we've got to get better at it, candidly. And that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is trying to figure out, are we going to move to a fund structure? Are we going to move to, more automation, all of these types of things? Like, how do we just kind of expand our investor base?
How are you currently approaching your leasing, marketing, acquisition, and where do you see the inefficiencies?
So there's several different parts of our business. On the property specific side, we do third-party property management. And so
Mhm.
really what Sweetwater does on that piece is asset management, meaning manage the manager.
Right.
For the property specific, we partner with a very reputable property manager, Redstone Residential, and they're top notch. They do a great job of marketing for specific properties. Now, for Sweetwater Companies and the marketing that we're doing here, I mean, look, you're looking at our marketing team, right? It's things that I do outreach wise, through my investor base, asking for referrals, those types of things. But we haven't really developed what you would call kind of an institutional marketing platform for Sweetwater.
With that said, with everything changing and technology, where do you see AI having the biggest impact on real estate operations?
Yeah, I'm in the camp that I don't think that AI is going to necessarily replace a lot of jobs, but I think the people that don't utilize AI will be replaced. And so, in fact, I was just looking at something in the news today that the U.S. is expected to increase its production over the next 7 years just because of the implementation of AI. And so I think what you're going to see, Ed, to answer your question specifically, those real estate groups that can implement AI are just going to be able to do more. That's more deals, raise more capital, all of that kind of stuff.
And it's overwhelming for some companies. I would say, and from what I have seen, and the main thing is, I agree. You have to do also AI responsibly. And a lot of people, entrepreneurs, they're a little overwhelmed by it right now. Quite frankly, they don't understand some aspects of it. They get the gist of it, but they don't know how to implement it and use it correctly. As you scale across multiple properties, what systems or processes have been critical to maintaining control and efficiency? Now, you mentioned one of having that excellent property management. Can you bring up any other ones that have really kind of processes that help you maintain control and efficiency?
Are you talking about software specifically or just
Anything.
processes?
Anything. Like I said, you took advantage. You went into and you hired actual somebody is excellent at what they do. That's part of your process. Something like that, or if it's just simple, just something that the audience, hey, what are you doing to really kind of streamline line your processes?
Yeah, scaling the team has been really critical to just, scaling the platform, obviously. We hired a young guy, young professional about a year ago that has been very instrumental in building out our platform. He's able to underwrite deals, he's able to network, he's able to source, all of these different relationships to kind of feed the funnel. We also have a construction expert on our team who's able to really kind of inform our underwriting on development and understanding those
Excellent.
pieces. The software that we utilize within the team, we use HubSpot for CRM. So that's where we tracked all of our different brokers, all of our different investors, all of those types of things. We also use Juniper Square that's for our asset management piece for investor reporting. We get the reports from the property management team, and then we're able to upload those into Juniper Square and send those out to our investors. And then the only other piece, there's an underwriting software that we use, RedIQ. Anybody that's in the real estate space, any of your listeners probably has heard of that. That's a pretty good software as well.
With the software, you would really say it seems like you're bringing in the right team. How important is the right team?
100%. I mean, I don't know if you can see on my shelf here, one of these books, Good to Great. Jim Collins, it's one of my all-time favorites. I highly recommend it. But he talks about getting the right people on the bus, and I 100% agree with that. If you get the right people on the bus, that's what's going to help your organization to scale for sure.
In the next year, where do you see Sweetwater? Where are you focused in terms of growth and expansion?
Yeah, I mean, really, we are kind of a deal-driven business, right? And so what I mean by that is it's finding opportunities, not just any opportunities, but the right opportunities, and going and closing on those opportunities and developing an asset or acquiring an asset. Right now, based on our pipeline of opportunities, we have, I told you we're about 115 million in AUM. We're looking to get, with our pipeline of actionable opportunities, it's around 750 million. Now, are we going to be able to capitalize or execute on every one of those? Absolutely not. That's kind of the point of the funnel. But to give that some context, I mean, that 750 million in pipeline stems from a pipeline, an original funnel of 5.5 billion that we looked at over the last year of different opportunities. We kind of whittled it down to that, and we'll go forward and execute on probably, if I had to say, based on that current pipeline, roughly a third of those. So we'll close on one development opportunity this fall. We've got another one that we'll close on in Q1 of 27. And then we've got an acquisition opportunity that we're under contract on that will close later this year as well.
So you're planned out over the next couple of years. That was actually going to be my next question, how you plan on going about getting there.
Yeah, the nature, it's both a blessing and a curse of real estate is, these are large investments, right? And so there's a long lead time and before you actually close on a deal. Like this deal that we'll close on, the development opportunity, total capitalization is around 85 million. Right. And so there's a lot of work to go through construction drawings, make sure that you've got exactly what you want to have built, finalized. You've got pricing on that before you close and start construction. So we're running a lot of those processes concurrently. But yeah, that's exactly how that works.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys got to be really excited what's coming up in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and we would love to go faster and do more.
Do you see AI helping you in that cause?
Yeah, 100%. I think really what's going to help us probably scale the most is we utilize AI to attract like-minded investors. I think that's really what's going to help us kind of scale, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, the more you streamline, the faster you could get the results, prove efficiency, that's where it's at. You got your right team, your team in place. And yeah, excellent. Excellent. Ryan, what is there anything that you want to promote that you guys got going on? Where can they find you if they want to invest or anything really
Yeah,
on your business?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, sweetwatercompanies.com. Certainly find us there. But and really, certainly we're always looking for people that agree with us and kind of how we see the world. But we also just offer up, if you ever just want to ask us questions about how we're looking at real estate, how we're looking at different opportunities, we love to be a resource. So feel free to ping us that way as well.
And what do you think makes you different from other companies doing the same thing?
I think that we're very thorough, data driven, and I think we're very, analytical. As I mentioned, to underwrite $5.5 billion of different real estate opportunities and whittle that down to $750 million of potential. I mean, that just tells you kind of the amount of rigor that we're putting a deal through before we even say this is worth our time or this is worth something that we should, this is something that we should pursue.
Brian, I really want to thank you for the great conversation. I really appreciate you breaking down what it takes to build and scale integrated real estate company like you have here at Sweetwater. Excited to see where you guys are going the next couple of years and where your team is taking you to the next level. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this episode with anyone passionate about innovation, leadership, or the future of intelligent automation. I'm Ed Moran, and as always, stay visionary.